Mel, you have the Niners taking Trubisky over Watson. Why?
Well, I think you look at the overall body of work of Mitch Trubisky this year. This was the only season he was a starting quarterback, so some will say, hey, a one-year starter, we can't take that high. But he had a great season overall. He did have the major struggles in the Sun Bowl against Stanford, where he had interceptions, bad decisions, some inaccurate throws, the fumble as well. Whereas Deshaun Watson late was playing his best football. Deshaun Watson early in midseason was not. You would have thought Deshaun Watson won the Heisman Trophy based on the way he finished. He did not. Lamar Jackson did. Why? Because he had early to midseason struggles with accuracy and decision making. Now he got hot. He caught fire. He had that great Final Four, culminating with the game against Alabama, where he was lights out, same as last year against Nick Saban's defense. But when you put it all together, I gave the slight edge to Mitch Trubisky for number 2 overall pick to the San Francisco 49ers.
Mel, I'm not sure Mitch Trubisky could throw that game against Alabama. I'm not sure Deshaun Kaiser could as well. Feels like a tough judgment on Deshaun Watson. Why isn't he ahead of those guys?
Best equipped to be a great NFL quarterback. It's a big difference there. And certainly Deshaun Watson, as Paul Feinbaum astutely commented on and pointed out, 99, nearly 100 plays. Last year, it was 85 plays. In the NFL, you're in the 60s. Huge difference. They were worn out, that Alabama defense. They were worn out last year. Okay, that's the difference in college football and the NFL. Deshaun Watson in the second half took advantage of that. In the first half, they did nothing. Okay, second half, I think it was more of that tired, worn out Alabama defense allowed for a lot of those opportunities and some contested catches. How about Mike Williams looking like a top 10 pick in the first round? Jordan Leggett had the drop, but had several really good catches. Okay, Hunter Renfrow to me was the MVP of the game. If he doesn't tackle Ryan Anderson, it's a touchdown.
What's your chief knock against Watson as an NFL quarterback?
Well, I think the preciseness and the accuracy throwing the football, and we don't know how tall he is. Is he 6'2" legit? Is he 6'1" and change? We'll see at the combine. You don't have measurables, accurate measurables, until the combine for underclassmen. The Heisman Trophy went to somebody else because the whole totality of the season was taken into context there. And I think you look at the early to mid portion, Deshaun had some struggles with decision making and accuracy. He got better late in the year, and he culminated with another great performance against Alabama, same as what happened last year. Does that mean he'll be a first-round pick? He could be, but right now Mitch Trubisky's number 1 solidly, and then you have Kaiser, Notre Dame, Watson, Clemson. You also have Kaya, Miami. How about Patrick Mahomes, Texas Tech? There's going to be a real battle to see who will be the second quarterback off the board. But right now I have a second-round grade on Deshaun Watson.
You know, something I never quite understood, even before I was doing this as a full-time profession, is how on earth Mitchell Trubisky rose up draft boards so rapidly in the 2017 NFL draft. I mean, when I was watching the previews to the NFL draft, this guy seemingly came out of nowhere. He only played 13 games in an NCAA season, and for the most part, he looked fairly pedestrian. And honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't know who Patrick Mahomes was back then really well. I only knew him from his duel with Baker Mayfield when Texas Tech faced off against Oklahoma, and that was remarkable in of itself. But the only thing I did know in my heart of hearts is the fact that Deshaun Watson was deserving of the top quarterback spot, the top QB selection. He was killing it at Clemson. He was winning national championships against absolutely unstoppable defenses. So what's going on, guys? Your boy Mike here. Before we get to the analysis, make sure you sack that like button for the YouTube algorithm and enter our PS5 giveaway on Twitter. We're going to be announcing that really soon. Now that we got all that out of the way, break! Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Guys, before we get to the analysis of Mitchell Trubisky and who's really at fault for the fact that Mitchell Trubisky failed, I'm going to satisfy a decent portion of my subscriber base that is probably a huge stat head. So, according to some deep research I did, last year Lamar Jackson threw 17 touchdowns on 282 throws that targeted a receiver within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage last season. For comparison, Mitchell Trubisky threw just 17 touchdowns on all 516 attempts, which was nearly double the amount of attempts. 19 of Mitchell Trubisky's passes should have been intercepted in 2019, which ranks 12th amongst qualifying quarterbacks. If those passes all would have been intercepted, then Mitchell Trubisky would have thrown 29 interceptions on the year, which is one less than Jameis Winston's league-high 30 interceptions last year. Mitchell Trubisky was 49.1% accurate against the blitz last season, which is 23rd ranked amongst the 29 qualifying QBs done in this study. But it's not all bad, and this is what I want to discuss because there are some positive analytics I want to throw at you guys. Mitchell Trubisky was accurate on 19 of 38 deep passes that arrived outside the numbers, which is the 5th most accurate quarterback to that area of the field, which is very promising when you're trying to develop a quarterback. And then finally, on 3rd and 5 last season, Mitchell Trubisky was 61.5% accurate throwing to the first down line, which is the 5th most accurate quarterback in the NFL, which brings along the question, who is to blame for Mitchell Trubisky's situation right now? Is he truly that horrific of a quarterback? I want to discuss more of the outside the football perspective, who really is to blame for this situation. And Matt Nagy knew what he was getting into when he came into this job with the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears knew who they were getting when they brought along Matt Nagy, because before Matt Nagy even came and joined the Chicago Bears, Mitchell Trubisky already had a body of work in the NFL. He played 12 games for the Chicago Bears in the 2017 NFL season underneath John Fox, who was fired at the conclusion of that season. And well, whenever you're interviewing a brand new head coach, one of the first things you're gonna have to ask him is, hey, we drafted Mitchell Trubisky last year, and I traded up and gave up multiple third-round picks in order to acquire him. Do you believe your offensive system will be able to support Mitchell Trubisky's skill set? And to that question, Matt Nagy may have wanted to say no, because I'm starting to believe that this isn't 100% Trubisky's fault. Yes, there are some reads he's made that were just god-awful, just horrific. There's something that just makes me scratch my head about all of this, and I'm not trying to blame Matt Nagy because I think Matt Nagy's a pretty good coach. It's the fact that how is it that Mitchell Trubisky in his first season with Matt Nagy was able to have a 24 touchdown, 12 interception season, throwing 67% completion percentage, and then the very next year begin to regress. And even his regression wasn't that bad, because his regression the very next year was 17 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, over 3,000 yards, 63% completion percentage. And I understand these statistics don't tell the full tale because, again, I showed you that earlier that Mitchell Trubisky could have had the second most interceptions on the year. But something else you need to take into account is the fact that the Chicago Bears didn't do much to support Trubisky on the offensive side of the field. As a matter of fact, the Chicago Bears didn't really have much of an ability to build around Trubisky because they mortgaged so much draft capital in order to trade for Khalil Mack. And I can't help but feel like there's a certain element to this that kind of indicates that Mitchell Trubisky was set up for failure. And if I had to point the blame finger at anyone, it would probably be a combination of Ryan Pace, the general manager, and Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes. Because meanwhile, yeah, Deshaun Watson also has a tumultuous front office that's trying to absolutely decimate him and destroy him. And Patrick Mahomes turned out to be an absolute stud. And I'm sure Trubisky is consistently hearing how the other two quarterbacks drafted after him turned out to be a lot better than him, because we could all agree that Trubisky was placed in as good of a situation to succeed as Patrick Mahomes, only he didn't really have as much of an offense and he had a significantly better defense. But I believe that's the biggest problem, because Ryan Pace gave up multiple third-round picks. One of the third-round picks, by the way, turned into Alvin Kamara, which we should definitely talk about as well, and drafted a project quarterback with no intention of developing him or giving him any support as well on the offensive side of the field. I don't think Mitchell Trubisky's sophomore slump, well, I guess junior slump, but technically his third year under center with the Chicago Bears, I'm talking about last year, I don't think it was that horrific. As a matter of fact, I think if he was on any other team, he would be fine. But when you draft a quarterback and immediately as a rookie expect him to compete for a championship, but you don't really give him much weapons to work with on the offensive side of the ball, and you give him a phenomenal defense, and then every single time the offense underperforms, you end up blaming Trubisky, then it's definitely going to put a damper on his confidence. And I'm not saying Trubisky's a great player. I'm saying Trubisky needed to be developed, and the Chicago Bears failed to develop him. And now you have a head coach whose back is against the wall, because now that Trubisky isn't performing on the offensive side of the ball, people are going to start questioning whether Matt Nagy's scheme actually works or not. Enter Nick Foles, the player that they traded for, who Matt Nagy has a history with when they were on the Kansas City Chiefs together. You see, Matt Nagy isn't focused on the long-term future of the Chicago Bears, and I really don't blame him, because at this point, if you're not performing and your team isn't making runs to the playoffs, then you are probably going to be fired, and people are going to be blaming you at the end of the day for it. Which is why Nick Foles entered this past week and absolutely crushed it. So at the end of the day, yeah, Mitchell Trubisky isn't the greatest quarterback, but this could have been Patrick Mahomes as well. You have to bear in mind, Patrick Mahomes needed to be developed as well. The Kansas City Chiefs did a better job developing Mahomes than the Chicago Bears did of developing Trubisky. And at the end of the day, they haven't been able to spend a single first-round pick, or hell, like the best help that he got was a second-round pick in the form of a tight end this year, in helping Trubisky on the offensive side of the ball. You can't draft a quarterback and automatically assume that they're going to be like the Michael Jordan of football to come and save your team. Like, I'm sure Deshaun Watson, if he was in Trubisky's situation, and I'm sure we could do a Madden simulation to figure this out for sure on Twitch, and the Chicago Bears may have been able to make some deep runs to the Super Bowl and maybe even had a promising future because, hell, they have a pretty good defense, but that's not the quarterback Trubisky is. And that's fine. Phillip Rivers took a couple of years to develop. Teddy Bridgewater took some time to develop. Hell, even Jared Goff took some time to develop, and we're even seeing a late resurgence of Ryan Tannehill's career. So at the end of the day, yeah, Mitchell Trubisky may have not been the most talented quarterback to select, and he definitely didn't fit in the Chicago Bears' plans. He definitely wasn't the quarterback that you just plug in and give the reins to and say, hey, you have a Super Bowl defense over here, make the most of it and take us to the promised land. He clearly needed some seasoning, and that's why the Chicago Bears messed up this pick. You know what really sucks? If the Khalil Mack trade happened a little sooner and it appeared as though the Chicago Bears were ready to make a big run and a big push to the Super Bowl a little bit sooner, I think they would have went Watson over Trubisky. But I guess they thought that Trubisky's long-term ceiling was way higher, but his floor was way lower. And unfortunately, he's closer to his floor as opposed to his ceiling. And if you ask me, the person that needs to take the blame for this is Ryan Pace. Because Ryan Pace pretty much drafted a rebuilding quarterback and then tried to contend for a Super Bowl at the same time. And he paid a huge price to draft this rebuilding quarterback. I don't think it was necessary to move up for a quarterback in the 2017 NFL draft. As a matter of fact, I think at the end of the day, picking between Trubisky and Deshaun Watson would have been a crapshoot, and whichever would have won was your guy. I don't think that either of them were worth trading up for, because at the end of the day, back in that time, nobody thought that draft was going to be that deep. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think? Do you think Trubisky has a future in the NFL? Do you think that he's probably going to fizzle out after this year and we're never going to hear from him again? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.